he was looking for real connection. And it looks weird that you think it's real connection while he was disconnecting with drugs and alcohol. And that what he was really looking for was real connection, I think. And we were giving him this parental mumbo jumbo that he couldn't connect with.
Welcome to Tilt Parenting, a podcast featuring interviews and conversations aimed at inspiring, informing, and supporting parents raising differently wired kids. My name is Debbie Reber, and today's episode is a powerful, heartfelt conversation that I am honored to share with you. I'm talking with my friend, Kayce Stevens Hughlett, a psychotherapist, life coach, spiritual director, and speaker, and the author of 3 books, As I Lay Pondering, Daily Invitations to Live a Transformed Life, her novel Blue, and her journey memoir, SoulStroller, Experiencing the Weight, Whispers, and Wings of the World. Kayce and I have been friends for many years, and she was a compassionate listener and empathetic friend as I was going through some of my most challenging years with Asher. Kayce was a few years ahead in her journey with her own differently wired son, who was in his early 20s when we first met. I wanted to bring Kayce onto the show to talk about what she and her family went through when her son, as a young teenager with an ADHD diagnosis, got involved with drugs. I know that this is something many parents with atypical kids fear may happen with their kids, and some listeners may be dealing with this very situation even now as they're listening to this. And so to hear Kayce tell her story and share intimately about how she not only got through it, but how her family emerged on the other side more engaged and connected than any generations before them is incredibly powerful, and I hope to all of you listening, inspiring. And a little public service announcement before I get to our conversation. I would like to just come right out and ask you to consider supporting this show and Tilt Parenting by joining my Patreon campaign. Patreon is a platform that allows people to support artists they like, musicians, or in my case, a podcaster, by signing up to make a regular contribution. If you enjoy these conversations and they're beneficial to you and your family, please consider supporting this show at the $20, $10, or even $5 a month level. That money goes directly toward covering the production costs for the show and also just the costs associated with running Tilt Parenting. Thank you so much for considering. And if you want to learn more or sign up, just go to patreon.com/tiltparenting. Thanks again. That's the end of the PSA portion of this episode. And now here is my conversation with Kayce. Hey, Kayce, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Debbie. So good to be here. So good to be here.
I feel like this is a conversation a long time in the making because you and I have talked about what we're going to talk about today many, many years ago before Tilt was even in my mind. And when I was kind of in the throes of it with Asher when he was a little guy. So this, I'm looking forward to bringing your perspective onto the show.
Thank you. Me too. I remember. He was 9 when we met. And
yeah, or even younger, I think.
Even younger, maybe.
Yeah. So I guess as a way to get into our conversation, because this is going to be more of a parent chat, and really, I'm happy to share your personal journey with our audience because you've been through this. Your Differently Wired son is grown and launched, and it's just so helpful to hear kind of your journey. So tell us a little bit about who you are as a woman, as a mom, and then we'll use that to lead into telling us your story.
Okay. Gosh, such a big question, right?
I know, sorry. Go for it.
So, when I describe myself to people, I say I went from accountant to author and good girl to risk taker, and from Oklahoma to Seattle. And now I'm this person who explores the world, and I have a background. I have a master's in counseling psychology, so I practiced for several years as a psychotherapist. You and I met when we were in coaching training, so I'm a certified life coach. But really how I got to all those things was by being a mom, and especially by being a mom of this young man who is now almost 30 years old, who broke open every paradigm I had in my life through his being him, and really me trying to make him be something else. But in the process, though, I found that I wasn't being true to who I was either.
Mm-hmm. Why don't you tell us about your son then? Tell us what, you probably know that most people listening to this podcast, kids are all over the age range. A lot of parents who are listening to this have kids who are in those elementary school years where things are just really, really becoming challenging, and they're getting more information about what's going on. And, the choices that they may feel that they have are looking more and more limited. So can you tell us a little bit about your journey back in those years?
Yes. So my son I call him Jonathan. Now that he's a grown man, he goes by John. But I still, he's like, Mom, it would be weird for you to call me anything else. And so Jonathan came along, and he was very artistic. Like, he could draw from the moment he could hold a pencil. And I was from this family that was very structured. Like, you color within the lines, and art wasn't a part of our life. And so from the beginning, there was this frustration because he was messy, he was wild, he was creative, and I'm trying to keep the kitchen counters clean. But I didn't know anything else. And so I think about some of your calls, with the calls you've had with Darren, and this idea that, well, this is how we were raised and it worked for us. Mm-hmm. So, which is like, oh, it so didn't work. I mean, it was how it was. But so we found that he was pushing these boundaries, and like when we would ask him to do something, he pushed back, and we were frustrated with what to do. And so we weren't impressed with the public school system close to us. And so we were in a church community, and they said, oh, he needs structure. He needs structure. And so everybody kept telling us that he needed structure. And so what we realized was that it was probably fourth grade, he got an ADD diagnosis. I'm still, I still don't even really know what to do with that diagnosis, but it was helpful for us. But I remember when I was reading Differently Wired, and I came to this section, and it was these kids that they just don't quite fit in the classroom. And the teachers are calling, we're getting the teacher called, and he's that kid. Mm-hmm. He's that kid. And then the parents start to look at me sideways like, oh, she's the mom of that kid.
Yeah.
And so he started to get this label. And, when I read Asher's story, it brought so much back to me, because I was still so unaware at that time of what was going on, and what was probably going on in his little body, where he just wants to create. And the other thing was, he doesn't transition well. And so if he's into something, he's really into it, right? And then somebody says, okay, time to stop, clean up, put the stuff away. And so we were just meeting these battles all the time, and it was happening at school, and then it came at home because we didn't understand what was going on. And so things began to escalate, and this anger from him, and then from us. And there were times that I was just like, who am I? I'm like, who is this person? Because as he got bigger, I couldn't just like pick him up and put him in timeout. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how much further to go into the story, but ultimately, long story short, he ended up turning to drugs and alcohol to kind of soothe his discord with the world and with himself. And that was when he was probably started when he was 13. We found out right after he turned 14.
Wow. Wow. So as much, I can imagine these are painful things to be talking about, but I also know that this is something that I think so many of us listening to this conversation, including myself, we've read the articles, we've read the clickbait, the headlines about that there's a higher risk for differently wired kids, specifically kids with the ADHD, ADD,
Yes.
To have problems with drugs and alcohol. So can you tell us a little bit about just what was that like for you? How did you move through that? And I know it wasn't a quick fix.
Right,
thing,
right.
But tell us a little bit about your journey through that.
Yeah. So what happened was when he was 13, we had tried everything school-wise, and ultimately when he was in 6th grade, we brought him home, and I homeschooled him for a year and a half. And it was really a sweet time. And I started to learn how he learned. And then but at the end of that time, he so desperately wanted to be a normal kid. And so we made a deal with him that if he finished all of his schoolwork at a certain time, he could enroll in school at the end of the year and go to the public school. And so he was 7th grade. This was 7th grade. And he went, and it was a disaster. It was just, putting a kid in at that time of year, everybody's bonded there, and it's middle school, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so his frustration, our frustration escalated. And so he went away for a year to it was basically a behavioral modification school. And it was like a step program where if he behaved this well, then he got these rewards. And I don't recommend it, and so, but what happened was we didn't have any tools. And so when he came back, we said, well, what are we supposed to do? And they said, oh no, you just set boundaries, you just set guidelines. And well, he defied them, right? But then they kept saying, what they told us was they said that you sent us a young boy, you have a teenager now. So what happened for us was we started to see these signs, but we ignored them. I didn't trust my own internal instincts. I didn't trust that something was bad.
Why do you think that is?
That's my bigger story, Debbie. That's my bigger story. If I was raised that everyone else had the answers, that there were the experts. And so these experts were telling me that these were normal teenage behaviors. And my gut, which I hadn't started practicing listening to on a consistent basis, was telling me something totally different. And that's why, I hesitate even, I go, oh, I'm going to be on this call. I have this experience and I, by no means, am an expert on anyone else's child, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I had this experience of believing that I believe in good too. And so I didn't want to dive into the fear of, like you said, the clickbait, the things. And I thought, no. And this example that keeps coming to my mind was like, he was very fastidious and he loved shoes and, the Michael Jordans they used to be, and all these things. And well, he was kind of obsessed with cleaning his shoes. Well, he was huffing, he was inhaling the shoe cleaner.
Oh, wow.
He was killing his brain. And it was happening right under my nose. And I feel so foolish. And believe me, I've gone through hours of the what ifs if I'd done something differently. But we were in this place because he was this, 13, 14 years old, and, they start to change. And so, but we didn't have this, I think what it was, he didn't trust us and we didn't trust him in a way to communicate on an authentic level. And so, and I think the reason for that was because I wasn't communicating with myself on an authentic level. I kept believing that if I follow these rules, if I follow these guidelines, if I do what everybody else is telling me I should be doing, then it's going to work out.
We'll be right back after this quick break. During this month of planning and organization for big transitions, rhythms and routines have been absolutely essential for our physical and emotional well-being. So Green Chef nights are reliably and predictably a good night. We know the ingredients will be fresh and prepped, the instructions easy to follow, and the meal delicious. We're all still talking about last week's turkey tacos with mango chimichurri sauce, refried beans, and Monterey Jack cheese. Green Chef contributes to a healthy lifestyle with easy and delicious menus like fresh seasonal salads and grain bowls. And with over 80 weekly meal and market options, plus rotating options to suit a variety of lifestyles, whether Mediterranean, plant-based, calorie-smart, keto, protein-packed, gluten-free, there are always plenty of options to choose from. Whatever you select, you'll get farm-fresh ingredients, organic whole fruits and veggies, and premium proteins, all delivered straight to your door. I love those 4 words. Straight to my door. Oh, and one more thing I love about Green Chef, they have an app, which means it's easy to manage meal preferences and delivery from your phone if you want to. And I, for one, want to. I am in that mode where I'm making the most of little moments like waiting in line at the pharmacy or for the F train to pull into the station to tackle all of those to-dos. So the convenience of an app is key for me. Green Chef has a special offer for Tilt listeners. Go to greenchef.com/tilt50 and use code TILT50 to get 50% off plus 20% off your next 2 months. That's 50% off plus 20% off your next 2 months when you use the code TILT50 at greenchef.com/tilt50. Maybe I've watched too many seasons of The Amazing Race, but every time I have to go somewhere on the subway, I treat it like a competition. It's all about making the right gut decisions about which route will get me there the fastest. Sometimes those decisions get me where I'm going early, and other times my gambles don't really pay off. Probiotics can't help with most gut decisions, but if your gut needs a little support, Ritual has your back. Their Synbiotic Plus, a 3-in-1 supplement, has clinically studied prebiotics, probiotics, and a postbiotic to support a balanced gut microbiome. I've been using Synbiotic Plus for about 6 months now, and it's become a core part of my morning routine. I take the mini capsule every morning while making my way through my inbox, whether I'm at home or I'm on the road, because it doesn't need to be refrigerated. And the capsule itself is delayed released, which helps it survive the harsh conditions of the upper GI tract for delivery to the colon, and that's exactly where we want it to go. Ritual invested in a study modeling the human colon, which showed that Synbiotic Plus significantly increased microbial diversity and the growth of beneficial bacteria. There's no more shame in your gut game. Synbiotic Plus and Ritual are here to celebrate, not hide your insides. Get 25% off your first month for a limited time at ritual.com/tilt. Start Ritual or add Synbiotic Plus to your subscription today. That's ritual.com/tilt for 25% off.
There's so many pieces of this that I kind of want to dive into, but I think, what you're speaking to now is something that I'm certainly connecting with. And I think that it's not even that it's denial. It's just, it's kind of not knowing how our experience really fits in. It's not trusting ourselves. It's not even having other people to talk about who can identify with our experience. So we really are kind of operating in a vacuum in many ways. And there's a lot of just crossing fingers and hoping that things work out.
Right. Well, and it was a really scary time for us. It was really scary and it was really frightening. And what we found was that we were making a lot of the decisions that we were making out of fear.
Mm-hmm.
We thought we were doing it out of love.
That's something I talk and write a lot about is choosing out of love rather than fear. Can you give me an example of a decision that you made out of fear?
Yeah, I have one that I use this a lot because this was the one that someone gave to me that finally made sense. So we ultimately, Jonathan ended up he was in several different programs. We tried everything because that was where the fear was coming to keep him safe, because he became a danger to himself and to other people because he was very erratic. So we found a wonderful, it was a therapeutic boarding school, and they required that the parents be involved and the parents do their own work, and that they weren't there to fix our boys, that our boys aren't broken. And I think if that's what I can say to your listeners is our kids aren't broken. They don't need to be fixed. They need to know that we love them. But what happened was we sent him to this school, and we said it was because we love him, because we wanted him to be safe. And, we're doing this because we love you. But Mom and Dad, I don't understand. I don't want to go, but we love you, and we're doing this because we love you. And we were in this training with this very wise woman, and she said, yes, I know you love your son, but I think you did this because you are terrified. And she was right. And it doesn't mitigate. It doesn't mean we don't love him. It doesn't mean it didn't come from a loving place. But the deep-rooted thing was from fear. And what we learned from that was that he could sense that fear. And we weren't owning it. And so he could feel that incongruence in what we were saying and what we were doing. And he's very sensitive to that.
So it sounds like, if I'm understanding you correctly, the decision would have been the same, but it was the way in which you were presenting the decision that was inauthentic. And that's, yeah.
We would have made this, I think we would have made the same decision.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. But he was looking for real connection. And it looks weird that you think it's real connection while he was disconnecting with drugs and alcohol. But what he was really looking for was real connection, I think. And we were giving him this parental mumbo jumbo that he couldn't connect with. I mean, and I'll tell you a flip side story, Debbie, because it got really ugly at times. And we were later on, I mean, this was a mini year. I mean, we still take it one day at a time. He's doing well now. Let me just say he's doing very well now. But, a few years later, he was a little bit older. He was probably 18 by this time. And he was in another like inpatient treatment center here locally. And we were in a session, and he started to scream at me. And he said, Mom, the only thing, you're all about fear, and he's cursing at me, and he's like, you just live in fear. And, we're in there, and we're with a counselor, and my daughter's there, and my husband's there. And there's an intern whose eyes are like, oh my God, they don't know what to do with us. Right. And so I got up and I left the room. I just had to leave. It was just like, I couldn't breathe. And I went into the restroom, and I like cried in the ladies' room. And I'm just like, oh my God, how is this my life? But all of a sudden I got this calm because I understood this sense of love and fear. And I thought, okay, he's sensing something, right? He's sensing something. And so I went back in and I looked at him and I said, you are absolutely right. But I said, my biggest fear is that I'm going to stop loving you. And for a brief moment, I saw immense clarity and relief in his eyes. because he felt that was true. Mm-hmm. It was this terrifying, absolutely terrifying truth. And I feel like something shifted for us that day, because our relationship now, he knows I will be honest with him, even when it doesn't necessarily look pretty or, he knows my actions and words, my intent, at least. I don't always, I fail. Absolutely. Absolutely, I fail. But my intent is always to be truthful with him. And so that love and fear, they're tricky in there, right?
Yeah.
Because they're connected. Because if we don't fear, if we don't love, who cares?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tricky. And it can be really hard to know what's what. It takes often a lot of soul searching and reflection to really get honest with yourself about what's really going on here.
Yeah.
So would you say, was that moment where you shared that with him, in that honest way, was that a turning point for you? Or, how did you come to terms with what was happening and be able to make this shift so you could have a more honest relationship with him and with yourself?
Right. Well, lots of therapy.
Love therapy. Yes.
Yes. Well, and yes. And I was training. What's funny is I was in the midst of my training to be a therapist when all this was happening. And so, I was, he was immersed in these programs and how to get healthy. And so what I ultimately did was I immersed myself, but from a life-giving viewpoint for myself, which was different than this running around with my hair on fire. Like, oh my gosh, I have to do something for him. I have to do everything for him. This was this sense of, as I do this for myself, it is going to benefit others. And so, you asked how I did. It was this conscious, constant, and is this conscious, constant decision of how I'm going to be in the world and who I'm going to be in the world. And one of what I realized was that I grew up with this kind of disingenuous environment where I grew up in the South, and it was all about being nice. And so I grew up with people that they would say one thing to your face. And my mother was my prime example of this. And I would see her in the grocery store, and she would be so nice to someone, and she'd be so kind. And then she would turn around and she would say, like, oh my goodness, I can't believe she doesn't have her lipstick on. And I was kind of left reeling from that. And what I've realized is one of my core values is truth and integrity. And so when I make decisions on how and when I'm going to speak to my son, my hope is that I come from that place. And, I can give you example after example. One of the examples is we decided a long time ago that he cannot live with us. He can't live in this house with us. Mm-hmm. It's crazy making. It's crazy making for him, and he knows it. It's crazy making for us, and we know it. But he realized that it wasn't that we were being mean, but it was just like, no, it's not good for our relationship. And so we think, I think as parents, we think, oh my gosh, we're supposed to do everything, and it's supposed to look a certain way. Like support is supposed to look a certain way. And what I found sometimes with Jonathan, my best support is not being in his physical presence. Mm-hmm. My best support comes from sitting by the ocean and offering prayers out onto the waves. And so I think with our children, it's what happened for me in that moment when I stated my fear was that it was my greatest fear that I would stop loving this child. And I said it out loud, and we all survived. And I think that was a turning point for me. And I would say we not only survived, but we have thrived as a family. But it was scary.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, when we first met, you were still very much going through a lot of these things, and it's big. I mean, this is big stuff. This is the stuff that I get emails from parents, or if I'm doing conversations with parents, and we talk about this, getting real about your deepest fears, getting it all out on the table. And the fears are big. They're self-harm, they're suicide, they're drug addiction. There are these really big issues. So, just knowing that there are people listening to this conversation who have those kind of fears about their, maybe their kids are much younger, maybe their kids are in those years where they're starting to think that while this is happening, are they dabbling, are they using negative, they're talking about self-harm or doing it.
Right.
What thoughts do you have for them, or what advice from your experience can you share with them to help them wrap their head around how they can move through this in a way that supports them and their family?
We'll be right back after this quick break. Hey there, it's Debbie. I love making this show and sharing conversations about how to support our awesome neurodivergent kids. I've seen how even one little insight from an interview can spark a big shift in daily life. But I know that raising complex kids can be messy and lonely. And just when we think we figured it out, something comes up that boots us right back to feeling overwhelmed and stuck. That's why I've poured everything into creating a way for parents like us navigating complex parenting journeys to join together and chart a path that feels positive, hopeful, and doable. It's the brand new Differently Wired Club experience. In the club, you'll get personal support from me and other seasoned parent coaches, 6 live calls every month where you can connect and get your personal questions answered, the opportunity to learn directly from authors and experts like I have on this show, monthly themes for getting specific and tactical, an exclusive private podcast feed, and the best, most generous community of parents. Seriously, these folks show up for themselves and each other, and that right there is really everything. Because it's a daily reminder that we're not alone. Our kids aren't broken, and we have totally got this. The recently rebooted Differently Wired Club is on a brand new platform with its very own iOS and Android app. It is such a great space. However you learn, whatever your style, no matter the ages, genders, and neurodivergent profile of your children, the Differently Wired Club can help you cultivate the positive shifts you're hoping for. Join us today by going to tiltparenting.com/club. That's tiltparenting.com/club. I hope to see you on the inside.
Lynn, this time of year, parenting can be such a flusterclux.
You've come to the right place. I'm Lynn Lyons, and I've been treating anxious families for over 30 years.
I'm Lynn's sister-in-law and co-host Robin Hudson.
Join us for Flusterclux, a podcast for parents who worry.
Wait, that's everybody.
Yeah, these last few years have felt like one long anxiety attack for so many.
Why do you think parents are always surprised that a podcast about anxiety relates to them, even if no one in their house has an anxiety disorder?
Well, worry is human. Everyone does it, and anxiety shows up when we face uncertainty.
All the parenting tips you've taught me have been essential.
I love to break it down into skills we need to manage worry in our families.
We've covered so many topics: depression, burnout, meltdowns, perfectionism.
Don't forget scary mothers-in-law.
Right, but of course that's not my mother-in-law.
Because that's my mother.
And a listener.
As a psychotherapist, I like to teach parents and kids how to respond to everyday moments in healthy ways.
Managing anxiety really can be taught.
It really can. And I'll even tell you what to say.
We talk about serious stuff, but without being too serious.
Anxiety wants everything serious. Anxiety doesn't stand a chance when we're laughing, even about the tough stuff.
Well, I think the number one thing for me was that I found a community that could support me, where I could actually say these things out loud. And that's not always easy. And I was working on a piece for another venue the other day. And it was this idea of how one of the things I started to do, I started to write, and I just put it all down. And just, there's this physical act for me. Writing, I said, writing saved my life, because I had all these thoughts. Like, I would wake up in the morning and I would have all these thoughts and all this energy, and I didn't know what to do with it. And then I'm supposed to go down and fix breakfast for my family, and I was like, I'm going to lose my mind. Mm-hmm. And so I started to write, and I did, the classic Julia Cameron morning pages. And so it was this active release. And I am a big believer in pencil and paper, like really old school. And because there's something of that connection. So there's this sense in this way. And I guess the suggestion or the thing is finding a way to expel that out of your body, if only for 5 minutes. If only for 5 minutes, and finding that way. And I mean, I have this whole bag of tools that, I still, to this day, it's like I wake up and I'm like, what do I need? Because there are things that still frustrate me, and that, you don't want to walk around saying to people, well, I really hate you, or, some of those hard things to say, but we need to find a way to express them, whether that's in a support group, whether it's, sending you an email. Just the sheer act of saying, I am feeling this way. I know I'm feeling this way, without judgment, without having to decide what the next step is, to just say, this is how I feel, and I don't like it. Or, gosh, it feels kind of good. Or, there's something about truth, and whether it's you speak it to your cat or your dog, and you find a place, whether it's a person, whether it's a place in nature, whether it's just between you and your notebook, a place to release some of those things. And I used to think that if you said something, or if you wished something, or if you wrote something down, it was absolutely going to come true, like it was jinxing things. And, and so I'm a bigger believer in releasing, so that we can make room for what we really want, which is really to love these people that are in our lives, even though in some moments that is the last thing we want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're making our lives hell. Yeah. But finding a way to support yourself if there's no one else that can help support you.
Right. So important. And let's talk, I want to, just as a way to kind of bring it full circle. I know this is the case for you. And I talk about this as well, that, even though I'm raising the child I didn't expect, and this journey is going way off course than what I thought it was going to look like, it's also, being Asher's mom has enriched my life in ways I could never have imagined. And it's helped me grow so tremendously. So kind of to take us where you are today, I'd love for you to share what you've gone through with your son, and, all those hard years and the work it's forced you to do on yourself. Like, how has that actually enriched your life?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. It didn't only enrich my life, Debbie. It saved my life.
Wow.
This journey saved my life. And I say this, and I say this over and over again. I would not wish this on any other person. Mm-hmm. And I cannot imagine my life without being Jonathan's mother, and in the best possible way. And so I indicated, and I said, I came from this very structured, very, very narrow, very small vision of what life could look like. And I was raised to be very practical. And there were things that I was never going to be able to do. And my life now, I literally have to pinch myself every day to go, this is my life. As I said, I went back to school in the midst of this, and I studied counseling psychology. And so I started to do that. And then in the midst of that, I started to write, and I had some other teachers, and I learned this idea of being present. And then when I was 45, I got my first passport. I'd never had a passport.
Wow.
And anybody that knows me now is just like, what?
Yeah, I'm surprised by that.
Yes, because you and I have met in Paris and Italy,
Mm-hmm.
and I travel the world, and I write books, and I have this amazing 4-year-old granddaughter that is Jonathan's daughter.
Adorable.
And yeah, yes. And I wasn't ready to be a grandmother. And so I'm Yaya. And Violet and I picked it together. But we loved it because it sounded more like yes.
Mm.
It sounded like yes. And what I've learned through this journey with my son is ways to define yes in my life and no in my life, and really crystallizing each moment. And I laugh as I say that because some of my moments are filled with binge watching Netflix, but and then there's this idea of grace and offering myself grace and saying, oh my gosh, I can't believe that when he was 9 years old, I had to sit on him and hold his shoulders down, and I screamed in his face. I'm like, who does that? And I go, but here we are.
Yeah.
And I just wrote this book that you know, and it starts with the moment we found out he had overdosed on drugs. And it's his story, but it's really my story. And I've watched him and I've talked to him about that. I'm like, I'm writing this story. I'm writing this. And he's like, that's okay, Mom. I trust you. It's good. And so to see him send me like on Instagram or Facebook and things, and he writes me these notes. He says, I'm so proud of you, Mom. Mm. And when he was in the midst, the beginning, kind of the beginning of the drug piece of it, and he was at this school where we were still untangling love and fear and, all of those things, and which we're still untangling. But he looked at me and he's just like, Mom, you're a firecracker. And I remember looking at him and I was going, no, I'm not. No, I'm not. And so he saw something in me before I did that I couldn't see in myself.
Wow.
And I think that's some of the inauthenticity he was bumping up against.
So interesting, right? What our kids,
yeah,
the mirror they are to us and what they show us about ourselves. It's incredible.
Yeah. And what they perceive. And we can't even begin to try to guess that. I was meditating this morning. I've been in this place right now with my daughter. And I'm like, I don't know how to be with her. I don't know. She's 26 and that's a whole nother story. But I kept coming back to this, just be. You don't have to have the next step.
Yeah.
Because if I had planned what my life was going to look like, no way would any of the hardships have been included. But more significantly, the joys and the successes and the just sheer delight would not have been there either.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, when you just lean in and go, and really go there, as low as the lows can be, the highs can be that much higher and so much more meaningful, the bright spot so much brighter. And it is it can be such a fuller experience, just a fuller life.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Kayce, thank you so much for sharing this. I really think this is going to be one of those conversations that is going to really impact people listening to the show, because it's so inspiring to hear just where you are and what your journey has been like and what's possible, even when it can be so hard to not live in that fear space and to just think this is all going to be bad. And even if things are really dark, to think there isn't a light. And, you know, I encourage listeners to check out your book. Kayce's book is SoulStroller, Experiencing the Weight, Whispers, and Wings of the World. And actually, she's written several books. So when you look her up on Amazon, or I'll actually list all of Kayce's books on the show notes so you can check them out. But it's very inspiring, and it'll give you more of the sense of peace and calm and possibility, which I feel like this whole conversation has been infused with, and it makes me feel so hopeful. And so can you tell listeners the best place to connect with you and to tap into where you live online?
Yes. All you have to know how to do is how to spell my name. And then you can find my website. You can find me on Instagram. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Twitter, but I don't really hang out there. But it's Kayce, KayceHughlett.com is my website. And that has my email address. I love getting emails. I am here. I mean, it's my hope. And I really come back to this idea is helping people find their own best answers. I'm great at quick conversations and emojis. I'm an emoji queen.
A badge you wear proudly, I assume.
A badge I wear, you know, and I can hold the hard stuff. And so I have people, you know, if you don't have that person and you say, I'm having a really hard time and I just need to say that right now I hate my kid, you can send it off to me and I will hold that and I will bless that and I will not judge that. So find me. I'm here in the world, and I think that's why I'm here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, listeners. Again, I will leave links on the show notes. You can easily, if you didn't jot down the spelling of Kayce's name, you can easily click through to that. And thank you so much for this conversation. I think just hearing from other parents, it's so important to all of us, because we can get so, you know, wrapped up in our own little silos of pain and fear and suffering and, you know, all the other, and confusion and overwhelm and all those things. And it's really powerful to hear stories from other people. So thank you for sharing yours today and for coming on the show.
Thank you so much, Debbie.
You've been listening to Tilt Parenting. For the show notes for this episode, including links to Kayce Hughlett's website, her books, her blog, and more, you'll find them at tiltparenting.com/session142. A quick reminder that my book Differently Wired is now available as an audiobook, narrated by me. To listen to a sample or to purchase it, just go to amazon.com or audible.com. If you haven't watched my TED Talk yet, called Why the Future Will Be Differently Wired, you can find it on the homepage of Tilt Parenting or on YouTube. TED Talks are all about ideas worth spreading, so I'm asking for your help spreading this one. I wrote the talk to challenge employers and colleagues and community members and other people in our lives who might not be raising differently wired kids to consider the importance of neurodivergence in our society. I'd love your help spreading the word to these audiences, so thank you so much. Lastly, don't forget to leave a rating or a review or both for Tilt Parenting on iTunes if you haven't done so already. Ratings and reviews help keep this podcast visible in what seems to be an ever-growing sea of podcasts. Thanks so much for taking the time to support the show in that way. That's all for this week. Thanks again for listening. And for more information on Tilt Parenting, visit www.tiltparenting.com.
If you're a parent, I invite you to join us at the Mindful Mama podcast, where it's all about becoming a less irritable, more joyful parent. With sometimes hilarious and always thought-provoking experts and friends, at Mindful Mama, we know that you cannot give what you do not have. And when you have calm and peace within, then you can give it to your children. I'm Hunter Clark Fields, and I can't wait to see you there. Listen in to the Mindful Mama podcast.